The ball has become dead, and the game needs to be restarted. Restarts in the game of basketball present their own unique challenges, since there is a special set of rules and restrictions that are brought into the game. We need to know when a restart starts, when a restart ends, the rules and restrictions that apply, and get those plays right. That's what we're looking at today on Basketball Rules Expert, is some plays regarding restarts. Let's get started. Stick around. Greetings and welcome back to the Basketball Rules Expert, the show where we take National Federation of High School Basketball rules and lift them off of the printed page, breathe life into them, simplify, clarify, and amplify so that we can take the rules with us onto the basketball court where it is most important. Greetings again, everyone. My name is Greg Austin with A Better Official. I've been a high school basketball official here in the San Francisco Bay Area for over a decade. I consider myself knowledgeable about the rules of basketball, and this show is all about helping you on a journey to becoming a basketball rules expert as well. If this is the video content you find valuable, now would be a great time to hit like, subscribe, and notify so that you don't miss out on any of our new content. Join us on the live stream. We live stream every Wednesday and Friday. Put your voice in the game and let's all get better together. Allow me to thank, before we start, those who fuel our show, our tremendous show supporters. Les O'Connor Jr., Philip Go, Jimmy Salinas, Khamaali Rowan, and Michael Rausch. Much appreciated and much love. You want to support the show? I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes below. Tremendous. All right, today we're looking at restarts and some rules, scenarios that revolve around restarts. We have 3 restarts in the game. The way that we make the ball live after the ball has been dead, right? The ball's dead. We need to restart the game. We're going to, we want to know those 3 restarts, forwards and backwards. Each of them, though, presents its own unique issues, right? When we have a jump ball to start the game, are the officials truly ready to start officiating? We say we're ready, we jump on the court, right? But we're not acclimated, etc. We're at risk. When we have a free throw, the game has come to a stop. We are at risk of taking a little me time, right? We may only have one player who's playing basketball while everybody else is standing around on the first of multiple free throws. We're at risk of disconnecting from the game. And then on throw-ins, so many things can happen during throw-ins. Sometimes we can be caught off guard. So those are the 3 areas that we'll cover today. Some scenarios. What we want to see is, were the officials correct, yes or no, in their adjudication of these plays? And with that, let's get started with our very first play scenario. Prior to the official bouncing the ball to A1 for a free throw, there are no Team A players in any of the marked lane spaces. B4 moves from the lane space closest to the thrower to the middle lane space, which is normally occupied by a teammate of the thrower. The officials instruct B4 that they are not allowed in that space and they must move back to the other space. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So we have a thrower and we have 4 opponents of the thrower in marked lane spaces. Prior to the thrower receiving the ball and beginning their free throw attempt, one of the opponents of the thrower says, hey, this space next to me is unoccupied. I want to move from a space closest to the thrower to that's unoccupied space. Why? Just because. The officials say, you can't do that. Those spaces are reserved for teammates of the thrower, and you may not occupy those. So we're in this instance where the officials in this instance directed a player that they were not allowed to occupy this space. Were they correct by rule, right? And the answer is no. No, they were not correct by rule. And why were they not correct by rule? Indeed, those spaces are available to teammates of the thrower, but in National Federation of High School Basketball rules, unlike other levels, there is no restriction about a player here in this instance occupying a space if the opponent chooses not to occupy the space. So in this instance, were the officials correct? Yes or no? No. No, they were not. Let's move on now to our next play scenario. Before the ball is released on a free throw attempt by A1, B1 in a marked lane space extends their arm over the area between the lane spaces and contacts A2 in the second lane space. The try is unsuccessful. The officials rule a delayed violation on B1 and award a substitute free throw. Were the officials correct? Yes or no, right? We see this play happen all the time. We've got players in marked lane spaces. Prior to the release of the throw, player extends their arm into their and above their opponent's marked lane spaces, possibly contacting them, right? A hot stove touch. I see where you are. I'm ready to engage you in rebounding action, etc. Is this legal? Can a player, they're in a marked lane space, right? It's a little bit like a phone booth. Can they reach their arms outside of their marked lane space area, or do they have to keep their arms within that area, right? This could be a point of confusion. Players in marked lane spaces have restrictions upon them. This is a fact. Players in marked lane spaces have restrictions upon them. This is something that exists by rule, but there is no restriction. A player in a marked lane space has to keep their feet on or above the marked lane space area. But other parts of their body, there is no restriction by rule. Players are allowed to extend outside with their arms and their hands. It's a natural part of pre-rebound activity, and one that we expect to see in the game. So contacting their opponent is also not illegal in this instance. What is illegal is to have illegal contact, right? That's the important distinction. We cannot have a displacement of a player. We are not protected by that. A player in a marked lane space, though, can extend their arms outside of the marked lane space area and contact their opponents. So in this instance, the officials ruled a lane violation on this play. Were the officials correct? No. No, they were not, right? This is not a violation by rule. This is not, a violation by the opponents of the thrower, right? Would be a delayed violation if there was one, but this is not one of the violations prescribed by rule. This is legal activity, something that we're going to have to monitor. We don't want that pre-game arm fighting between opponents that we can sometimes see. But the actual actions, if they don't rise to the level of illegal contact, are legal by rule. Our crew is struggling. 2 incorrect rulings to start. Let's take a look at our next play scenario. Just after the release of A1's free throw attempt, first B5 and then A5 both run from behind the three-point arc toward the basket in an effort to get the rebound. The try is unsuccessful. The officials rule a delayed violation on B5 only ignoring A5 since B5 went first. The officials award a substitute free throw. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So we have a scenario where we have a teammate of the thrower and an opponent of the thrower from behind the three-point arc after the throw-in is released, but before it contacts, they rush in, right? Kind of like they do in the NBA, right? And violate. Both of them violate. But the officials say, wait a minute, when the defensive team violates first, we are to ignore the offensive team violation, right? I know I've heard that somewhere, right? And rule incorrectly in this scenario. When players in marked lane spaces, right, which these players are not, players in marked lane spaces, if the defensive player violates first and the offensive player violates as a result, we are to ignore the offensive player's violation in that instance. But these players are not in marked lane spaces. These players are beyond the three-point arc, and that distinction does not apply for them. Okay, so in this instance where we have an opponent of the thrower and a teammate of the thrower violate, we have a simultaneous violation or double violation by rule. When we have that, the ball becomes dead immediately. No goal can be scored. And that should have been the correct ruling on this play, but in this instance, the officials awarded a substitute free throw for a delayed violation, or a defensive violation. So in this instance, were the officials correct? Yes or no? No. No, they were not. Can the crew recover from such a dismal start? Hope springs eternal. Let's look at our next play scenario. After A1 begins the shooting motion on their final free throw, B1 in the first marked lane space extends an arm and displaces A2. The free throw is successful. The officials rule a foul on B1. Since the foul was before the release, they disallow the goal and award a substitute free throw with the lane cleared. Play resumes with an end-line throw-in for Team B. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So there's a little bit of a layered play here. Let's take a look. A1 begins their shooting motion on a final free throw. Opponent of the thrower extends an arm and displaces their opponent, teammate of the thrower. The officials rule, and then the free throw is successful. The officials rule a foul on B1, and since the foul was before the actual release of the free throw, they disallow the goal and award a substitute free throw with the lane cleared, because I assume then we are going to administer the foul for B1, right? And that would be correct. But there's one thing missing on this play, and that is an understanding of continuous motion. Rule 411, continuous motion applies for any defensive foul that occurs, right? And the player has begun their habitual throwing motion, is allowed to complete the normal activity, and this applies during free throws as well. So since the foul occurred after the player had begun their throwing motion, it does not cause the ball to become dead, and they are allowed to complete their motion, and the result of that activity shall count. So in this instance, we should have had a situation where we score the goal and then administer the penalty for the foul. If it was bonus free throws, we would, the teammate of the thrower would get their bonus free throws, or it's going to be a throw-in at the division line. So in this instance where the officials disallowed the goal, were the officials correct, yes or no? No. No, they were not. Hope springs eternal. I believe in this crew. They're going to come back. Let's take a look at our next play scenario. On a jump ball to start overtime, B2 is positioned on the center circle. After the ball is tossed, but before it is touched, B2 runs through the circle to a spot she anticipates the ball to be batted to. The officials rule a jump ball violation for breaking the plane of the circle prior to the ball being touched on the jump. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So, official blows their whistle, enters the circle, releases the toss, balls become live, but before the ball is touched, an opponent who's on the circle runs across to the other side of the circle because that's where she anticipates the ball being tapped to. The officials rule a violation in this instance. Were the officials correct? Is this a violation by rule? Jump ball rules and restrictions? Right? There is an imaginary cylinder for the center circle where the jump ball occurs, and a player is not allowed until the ball is touched on the jump. A player is not allowed to break that cylinder with their feet, right? So in this instance where the player ran across before the ball had been touched, they have violated by rule. Now, if it was after the ball was touched, then there's no such restriction, right? One of the aspects of restarts is there are restrictions on what players can do, and some of the restrictions go away even before the actual restart ends. Remember, each restart has a start and an end, and when it ends, all of the restrictions are gone. But sometimes, like with a free throw, right? The throw-in is released, and players in marked lane spaces are allowed. They are no longer restricted from entering the lane, but the thrower and players beyond the arc still are restricted, right? So some restrictions go away at some point intermediate, and then all of the restrictions when the jump ball ends. Now, this jump ball has not ended, and this player has violated. So in this instance, where the officials ruled a violation, were the officials correct? Yes. Yes, they were. Our crew is in a groove now. Let's look at our next play scenario. On a jump ball to start overtime, jumper B1 steals the tip by contacting the tossed ball before it reaches its highest point. The officials rule a jump ball violation on B1 and award the ball for a sideline throw-in to Team A. When the ball is at the disposal of Team A, the arrow is set to Team B. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? Jump ball to start overtime. Jumper contacts the ball before it reaches its apex. A violation is ruled by the crew. Sideline throw-in. We're going to have a throw-in at the spot nearest the violation. It's going to be a sideline throw-in. And we have yet at this point to set the possession arrow. When the ball is at the disposal of the thrower for the throw-in is the appropriate time to set the arrow in that instance. So our officials did follow things here procedurally correct, and their violation ruling was correct. Their spot throw-in location was correct, and the setting of the arrow by the table crew when the ball was at the disposal of the thrower is correct. So in this instance, where our crew ruled a violation, jump ball violation, resulting throw-in, and setting of the possession arrow, were the officials correct? Yes or no? Yes. Yes, they were. All right, we're back in the game. Let's take a look at our next play scenario. As the referee is on the upward motion to release the toss, A2, who has a position on the circle next to B2, quickly moves around B2's other side to where they think the ball will go. The officials rule a jump ball violation for A2 changing positions on the circle prior to the release of the toss. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Player on the center circle Give me a sec. Player on the center circle prior to the release of the toss changes position on the circle from the one side of their opponent or comes around them to the other side of the opponent, anticipating where they think the jump ball will be tapped to. Is this a violation by rule? Is this a violation by rule for a player to change position on the circle? Yes. Yes, it is. It's not a violation for a player not on the circle to change position, but players on the circle have rules and restrictions that are different. And this would be a violation by rule. So in this situation where the officials ruled a violation, were the officials correct? Yes or no? Why, yes. Yes, they were. Right? This is a violation by rule. Doesn't happen frequently. A lot of times officials mistakenly think that that restriction of movement that applies to players on the center circle applies to players who are not on the center circle, and that's erroneous. But in this instance, our crew got the call correct. All righty, let's move on to our next play scenario. As the referee is on the upward motion to release the toss, A2 near the sideline in a designed play sprints towards their goal in anticipation of receiving a pass after the tip. The officials rule a jump ball violation for the player moving prior to the release of the toss. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So we have prior to the official releasing the toss, right? This team has a play designed. What's going to happen is the tosser, the player competing for the jump ball is going to tip the ball to another player, and then that player is going to throw ahead for an easy layup. You see this play designed by coaches, one of the few jump ball plays. Right? So they have their player near the sideline take off in advance, right? Anticipating all this action. The officials detect this motion, right? And rule a violation on the play. Were the officials correct to do so, right? There are restrictions on players who are on the center circle, and there are obviously restrictions on players who are the jumpers. But the players who are not jumpers and the players who are not on the circle have no restrictions on their movement during a jump ball. It's important to know that. They can stand on their head, roll over on the floor, jump up and down, do jumping jacks, do burpees, run from one end of the floor to the other. They can do all of these things. There is no restriction on these players for this activity. And to apply restrictions that apply to jumpers and players on circles is a mistake. So in this instance, where the officials ruled a violation, were the officials correct? Yes or no? No. No, they were not. All right, let's move on now to our penultimate rule scenario. After a made basket and after A1 has picked up the ball for the throw-in, B1 reaches through the boundary plane and slaps the ball out of A1's hands. The officials rule a delay of game warning, admonish B1 not to do that again, and administer a throw-in to resume play. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? So after a made basket, player has the ball, has picked it up for the throw-in. B1 reaches through the boundary plane and contacts the basketball. What do we have on this play? Once the throw-in has begun, defensive player is not allowed to violate the boundary plane, which they did in this instance. They're not allowed to contact the basketball when it is on the out-of-bounds side of the boundary plane. So in this instance where the player reached through the boundary plane and contacted the basketball, this is not something that deserves a warning. This is a player technical foul by rule. In addition, if one has not previously been given, it would also result in a team warning for delay for the violation of the throw-in plane. Both of those things would be the penalty in this instance. So in this instance where the officials did not assess a technical foul, were the officials correct? Yes or no? No. No, they were not. Correct ruling would have been a technical foul and a delay of game warning in this instance. All right. For many, this is the favorite part of the show, our final rules question. Team A has an alternating possession throw-in. The throw-in pass is released by A1 and B2 intentionally extends a leg and deflects the ball. The officials rule a kicking violation and resume with another alternating possession throw-in. Were the officials correct? Yes or no? Right? Alternating possession throw-in. Ball's given to the thrower, right? They release the throw-in pass. Defensive player extends a leg and kicks the throw-in pass. Not an unusual occurrence during a throw-in. Oftentimes players extend a leg, right, in an attempt, to prevent the throw-in. And the officials rule a kicking violation and resume with an alternating possession throw-in, right? But something's not right here. The resulting throw-in after the kicking violation is not an alternating possession throw-in. The resulting throw-in is a throw-in for the violation itself. So it would be a designated spot throw-in. It would be nearest the spot of the violation, right? You could imagine constructing a situation where it was not right in front of the thrower and we would not have the same designated spot throw-in. But the throw-in itself is a designated spot throw-in because it is a throw-in for the kicking violation. So in this instance, the arrow would not have changed because the throw-in never ended for the alternating possession throw-in. The throw-in ends when it is legally touched or the throwing team violates. And neither of those things happened. So our alternating possession arrow would not change. The resulting throw-in would be a throw-in for the actual kicking violation itself. So in this instance where the officials erroneously awarded an alternating possession throw-in as a result, were the officials correct in this instance? No. No, they were not. A fitting conclusion to the show as our crews made numerous erroneous rulings on plays. Hey, thanks for joining us today for Basketball Rules Expert. If this is the video content you find valuable, be a great time to do all of the things. You can hit like, you can hit subscribe, you can hit notify so you don't miss out on any of our new content. We live stream every Wednesday and Friday. Join us for the live stream. Put your voice in the game. Allow me a moment to thank our tremendous show supporters who fuel the show. Les O'Connor Jr., Philip Go, Jimmy Salinas, Khamaali Rowan, Michael Rausch. Much appreciated and much love. You want to support the show? There's going to be a link in the show notes below and a link above. Awesome. Additional video content is available here. Here's a choice I've made. Here's a choice YouTube has made. You make your choice. We'll see you in the next one.